The Personnel Subcommittee of the Senate Armed Services Committee meets this afternoon to receive testimony from military and civilian witnesses on officer personnel management and possible reforms to the Defense Officer Personnel Management Act, commonly referred to as DOPMA. Officer personnel management is a combination of statute, regulation, culture, and tradition that determines how military leaders are recruited, trained, retained, promoted, assigned, and compensated. This is a very complex topic, and changes to long-standing practices must be carefully considered before being implemented. And by all accounts, today's system largely serves its intended purpose. A personnel system is not an end unto itself. Rather, the military's officer personnel system must achieve desired objectives to increase the lethality and effectiveness of the force. DOPMA was passed in 1980. It's back when leisure suits were popular, and disco. To achieve the desired objectives at that time, namely in 1980, the Congress was concerned about providing a fully ready officer corps comprised of youthful, vigorous, and at the time, primarily men. These outcomes were deemed necessary to defeat the Soviet threat that faced our nation at that time. I'm concerned that the outcomes DOPMA was designed to achieve are growing increasingly irrelevant for some threats facing today's military. I hope today our witnesses will provide us with some clearly defined outcomes that an updated personnel system should seek to achieve. DOPMA's authors never envisioned the post-Cold War military as presently constructed. Today's force is 43% smaller than the military of 1980 and is constantly engaged in ways never predicted during the Cold War. Repeated overseas combat deployments strain the more traditional warfighting career fields, while at the same time, new military domains require entirely different officer skill sets. We must ask ourselves, can a personnel system designed for an industrial age military be successful in the information age? DOPMA's primary weaknesses are threefold. First, the system is unable to quickly provide the officers required to respond to unforeseen threats that demand unexpected skill sets. Secondly, the system is unable to effectively respond to rapid changes in the defense budget, resulting in inefficient, and systemic surpluses or shortages of officer manpower. Lastly, DOPMA functions as a one-size-fits-all solution, which does not allow the services much ability to differentiate amongst themselves and among various officer career fields. I welcome your thoughts on how to improve the system to mitigate these shortcomings. Today, we're fortunate to have a distinguished group of witnesses to discuss these themes and help us seek out areas where the Congress can provide assistance. On the first panel, we have the Honorable David Chu, President of the Institute for Defense Analysis and former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. Welcome, Dr. Chu. The Honorable Peter Levine, a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Defense Analysis and also former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. Welcome. And Dr. Tim Kaine, a Fellow at the Hoover Institution and author of The Total Volunteer Force. I'll introduce the second panel when we make the transition. I want to thank all the witnesses. Very important topic. Ranking Member Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join you in welcoming our witnesses today as we discuss career management of our military officers. I'm pleased that we have outside experts as witnesses as well as military personnel chiefs to address improving the talent management of our military officers. I have been and remain concerned about our military promotion practices that incentivizes officers to be generalists on a career path to become general or flag officers and ultimately to be chief of the military service rather than allowing officers to develop expertise in specific military skills. I understand the importance of officers having a broad understanding of their service and the military, but in some cases, this undermines our military's ability to do its job. Senator Ernst and I have been pushing the services, for example, to develop judge advocates with complex litigation skills rather than requiring them to become well-rounded generalists in the practice of military law. As in the civilian sector, we need career prosecutors with years, even decades of prosecutorial experience to prosecute complex cases, particularly those related to sexual assault. A good prosecutor with just a few years and a limited number of cases is not going to be as good as a highly experienced prosecutor who has prosecuted a large number of complex cases. This same rationale would also apply to other specialty areas such as cyber, acquisition, aviation, medical, and newly developing areas like artificial intelligence. As we look at improving the officer personnel system, we should also review the qualifications for receiving a commission as a military officer. Is it really necessary that an individual with significant cyber expertise go through all the same military-type training as an infantry officer? If a cyber expert's military role will be in an office setting performing cyber functions on an office computer, does he or she need to be proficient with a firearm or meet the same physical fitness requirements as a combat arms officer? If our current approach means that we're not getting the right people in these jobs, then the requirements need to be tailored for the specialty involved and flexible enough to bring in the talent we need. Another area we should explore when it comes to cyber is making it easier for civilian experts to join the military so that when we identify individuals with sophisticated skills, education, and experience, we can bring them in at a higher rank commensurate with their military responsibilities. We must also be cognizant of the fact that even if we provide the military with greater authority and more flexibility for officer personnel management, that doesn't mean that these authorities will be used as we intend them to be used. This has been our experience with efforts to have our services conduct a pilot program for a career litigation track, a program that the Navy already has in place. Once we provide new authority, it will take continual congressional oversight to ensure that the new authorities are used as intended. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about what is working and what is not working with our officer personnel management system, and then putting our heads together to develop meaningful changes that will improve the system and ensure we are recruiting, growing, and retraining the right people.
Thank you. Before we get into any questions, we would welcome you to have any opening comments that you may want to make, and I've got a lot of questions, so we want to start with Dr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It is a privilege to appear before you this afternoon to discuss the Defense Officer Personnel Management Act, or DOPMA. I should stress these are my own views. They do not reflect position by the Institute for Defense Analyses or our research sponsors. I do have a short statement that I hope might be offered for the record, if you would permit. In my judgment, DOPMA's strength is also its weakness. With the just revised retirement system as it used to be administered, and given the fact that compensation in the military for officers is largely tied to grade, together that creates what you said, Mr. Chairman, which is a one-size-fits-all solution. And the difficulty that raises is across skill areas, as Senator Gillibrand has emphasized. It's not clear that you want the same experience level in all functions of the military services. That's been a tension for many years in the department. On the promotion front, the services have to some extent relieved that tension with separate competitive categories. Done that for a long time for the professions, clergy, lawyers, clinicians, especially doctors. There have been other solutions. The Army has a different way of accessing and managing many of its pilots that warrant officer status for its rotary community. And you have small solutions like the permanent professors at the United States Military Academy and the other military academies. Before we go to change the rules, I would urge we have more of a focus on what results we want, what kind of experience profiles are really helpful, as Senator Gillibrand suggested in the cyber realm as one example. You might want, in some areas, the pyramid that is the current favorite, that say lots of people come in at the bottom, the operational community likes that, only a few rise to the top. But it's also possible you want an inverted pyramid, where you have mostly experienced personnel and you don't spend a lot of effort on training junior personnel. Military attaches are an example, you might argue, of such a situation. In different communities, you might want a Michelin man. That's to say, many people in the middle, some at the top with deep experience. Acquisition is an excellent example. That would need lateral entry to actually work. So you wouldn't want to take in large numbers of junior people to train them on your watch. You'd want to require them from the civil sector. And in some areas, you might want a cylinder. Pilots are an example where you want people to spend a long time in one professional area. The Marine Corps has talked about that now a bit regarding cyber personnel. I do think ultimately, as you suggested, Mr. Chairman, this turns on service culture. What would the services say, are communities where they need a different experience profile because ultimately they have to administer this system to make it a success. Put a little differently, I'd start with the experience profile we'd like for different communities, and subject to any constraints that various parties wish to impose, including the Congress is concerned with grades, then solve for what you have to do with the other instruments at your disposal, whether that's the retirement system, whether that's the compensation that's offered, or whether that's perhaps bonus authority for officer communities, which the Department does not now have, in order to get to the results that you need to serve America well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Levine.
Thank you for inviting me today.
You want to put your mic on?
Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing, and it's an honor to be back in this room. With your permission, I'll make just a few brief points. First, the upper out system at its heart is still very much needed. DOTMA has been rightly criticized for limiting the department's access to needed talent and for pushing out highly trained officers with critical skills too soon. Even so, though, it continues to provide a highly competitive environment in which the officer corps is continually refreshed, routinely producing officers whose leadership qualities are the envy of the world. I had the privilege, while I was at the Department of Defense, of actually having general officers work for me, and I have to tell you, having that kind of direct exposure to them on a day-to-day basis, you can only come away impressed. Our officer personnel management system is an incredibly valuable investment portfolio that we rely on to produce results, not this year, but over a 20 to 30-year period. So we may want to diversify that portfolio and bring in creative ideas at the edges with the kind of skilled occupations that we've been talking about. But we need to be really careful that we don't break the overall portfolio, that it continues to produce the kind of results we need so that it can shape the force in 20 to 30 years. We can't focus so much on the next 2 to 3 years that we lose that long-term focus. Second, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you that we have to be very careful to avoid one-size-fits-all solutions in this area. What the Air Force needs may be very different from what the Marine Corps needs. What we need for the cyber workforce may be very different from what we need for the acquisition workforce. So I think it's important that you work with the military services and give them flexibility to do the kind of analysis that Dr. Chu is talking about and figure out what they need and address those needs rather than trying to impose a solution on them. Third, as Dr. Chu indicated, real change is going to require not just changes in laws and rules, but changes in culture and incentives. That's going to take leadership from the top down within the service because whatever new flexibilities or new career paths you may offer, they're only going to be successful if young leaders are convinced that when they follow these new career paths, it's not going to come back and disadvantage them tomorrow. If these career paths are perceived as being potential dead ends, and I would particularly warn you about the idea of temporary pilot programs, which will be perceived as potential dead ends, then they're not going to do us much good. People won't commit a career to something if they don't perceive that it's going to be there when they need it. Finally, I'd urge you to keep in mind that our active duty military do not need to and will not have to meet all of our needs in areas like cyber, intelligence, acquisition, space, those kinds of specialty career fields. We have a mixed total force that consists of military, civilian, and contractors. Within the military area, we have both active duty and reserve. They serve different purposes, and we need to think about that and optimize the entire force rather than just assuming that we can optimize the officer corps in isolation and that will address the problem. So with that, I would urge you to focus on increased flexibility rather than new requirements, to work closely with the department and to give direction to the services, but allow them to develop their own unique solutions for these problems. Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Kane.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Tillis, Ranking Member Gillibrand, Senator McCaskill, thank you for this opportunity. What I'll say today, these are my own views, not those of the Hoover Institution or Stanford University. And thank you for working together. I think this is a moment to work on a nonpartisan issue that may be rare, may not happen again for 20 years. So I'm excited to see significant change, not pilot projects come out of the committee, and this committee in particular and subcommittee can show how democracy works, especially for the volunteers. So I'm really enthusiastic about what you've endeavored and just holding this hearing. So my colleague and former Secretary of State, George Shultz, recently wrote Over 40 years ago, Milton Friedman and his friend Martin Anderson put forward the idea of ending the draft and recruiting volunteers for the armed forces. At the time, the bulk of flag officers thought that was a terrible idea. Now, the bulk of flag officers would say, this is brilliant, we don't want to go backwards, we want to go forwards. And I've been really encouraged in the talks I've had over the last 5 years, and worked on 2 books on this issue, to see the Navy in particular. They realize they need more flexibility than DOPMA is giving them. And I hear that from other officers in other services, but I think that the Navy's ready to strike now on this issue because they want to be more efficient and better and stronger, and we need this fixed to DOPMA to enhance our security. So Mr. Schultz didn't say all that. Mr. Schultz then said, since the draft ended in '73, the concept can now be said unequivocally to have succeeded, unquote. Yet despite the world-class leadership culture of the U.S. military, the bureaucracy still treats troops like interchangeable draftees. It's not only disrespectful, but also short-sighted, and this can't be fixed until DOPMA is fixed. Now, my research and the research of others, I think all 3 of us at this table, have looked into the quality of people who are volunteering, the men and women. It's fabulous. The literacy rates are above the civilian norms. Physical, moral, mental fitness is above average. Our enlistees and our officers are fantastic. But how they get treated is not so fantastic, and that's why we have, repeatedly, retention crises. Now, 3 years ago, I conducted a survey as part of this book, Total Volunteer Force, of 360 active duty officers, NCOs, and veterans to identify their thoughts on the Pentagon management system. The respondents gave high marks to the U.S. military's leadership culture, but low marks to talent management, as shown in Figure 1 of the written testimony. Across the board, they saw promotion and job matching practices as the most troublesome and the weakest. Promotion, that is encoded into DOPMA about how these things have to happen. This idea of up or out that we say is the culture, but it's not. It's coded into the law. So because of DOPMA, commanders can't hire, they can't flexibly adjust their people, and they're actually left with empty billets when they're removing an abusive coworker. So they get essentially punished for trying to get their teams to work better. Furthermore, promotions are completely lockstep based on seniority, not merit, and promotion boards are completely centralized and dehumanized. I'm using strong language because I think we assume the troops, the officers, work so hard on these promotion boards, and they're fair, and they're this and they're that. They might be all those things, but they're inefficient. And we can build something that's a lot better by maybe mandating some flexibility. That might sound funny. Get commanders involved in the process. Now, one of the side effects that concerns me of the law as it's written is that the sexual predators can hide in plain sight in the ranks. Sexual assault in the ranks occurs at 10 times the rate in the civilian sector. When you're rotating people constantly or rotating commanders constantly, unless someone is a proven criminal, you can't weed them out. There's no informal information so that when commanders hire, they're just given a person. They're not allowed to do a background check or a reference check. I think you need to get commanders involved in the hiring process, regardless of what you do on the UCMJ side of it, because we're talking about people who are predators and are not yet proven criminals, and they're still lurking heavily. Now, most men and women in the ranks aren't predators, but this system allows them to hide in plain sight, as I would say. Key reforms that I would encourage the Senate to make, and I'll just list 4 and then end. Let's kill the up or out principle that's coded into law. I don't think it's helpful. It's not how the military had its history pre-1945. The historical military principle for most of our history has been excellence or out. But we don't do that anymore. It really doesn't matter how excellent or unexcellent you are, you're pretty much guaranteed promotion pretty much all the way to 20 years. So we're not really forcing people out. There's a big bubble of officers between 12 and 20 years, and then suddenly they drop off. So some of this ties into compensation, but I think we should be forcing excellence and force people to require to recompete to stay in their jobs if they want to specialize. 2, end the mandatory use of year groups after 10 years and end forced retirement for non-promotion after 10 years. Number 3, restore balance to command authority. Let's give local commanders a voice in hiring so they can do informal reference checks. And then 4, allow innovation and flexibility by the services, despite, they may not use this flexibility, but right now they just don't have it. And I'll end on that, and thank you again for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. Senator Gillibrand will be back. She had a commitment that she has to go to. And Mr. Levine, I want to start with you. In your written testimony, there were 2 things that I think are good quotes that I may never attribute to you because they're so good, but I'm going to use them again. One, because I think it sets the tone of what I think we're trying to accomplish here. And you say that before you undertake reform, it's important to understand not only what is broken, but what is not broken. Let's talk a little bit. We've talked about some of the things that we should look at and possibly change, but let's talk about some of the things that you think are foundational and very important to keep in place.
Well, this is where I would agree with my colleague, Dr. Kane. I believe that the upper-out system needs to be kept in place, that because we need to shape a workforce over 20 to 30 years, we can't rely on individual decisions, for example, that I want to, and we can't rely on military leaders to structure their own teams in a free-form way. We want to be responsive to the civilian job market, and we want to recognize the realities of the civilian job market. But we're not in a position where we're just hiring for the next 2 to 3 years and we can allow our whole officer corps to turn over and get a new one if that doesn't work. We have to plan far in advance, and I think that the upper-out system is a way of continually refreshing. So I think the subcommittee ought to be open to different periods of time, different tour lengths, all kinds of different flexibility within DOTMA are open to consideration, but I think the upper-out system itself not only works, but performs a vital function for our military today.
So, Dr. Chu, you get to break the tie. What are your thoughts?
I would put myself someplace in between. Split the difference.
Purple.
And here's the reason. I think it is very important, as Mr. Levine is emphasizing, to have some mechanism to judge, is the individual continuing to develop? Is he or she continuing to perform at high levels, as Dr. Kane said? Upper out is one mechanism. The problem is it's very rigid at the moment. And you come into a window, you get just 2 chances. If you've had an unusual career such you didn't do the normal things, you might be severely disadvantaged by that. Admiral Krause is an example of that career path. Most people were amazed he ever made flag. Once he made flag, the rest of the system took over, and he eventually, as we all know, became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Never having commanded a ship at the ship level. He was XO of a submarine. So we can do things differently, but the present system doesn't allow much leeway for that. And so I think in terms of relaxation, giving the service secretaries some degree of latitude to change the rules, whether that's to encourage them to use more selected to retain in grade, which authority is already there in the existing rules, whether it's allowing them to put people in different year groups, as different careers might suggest, so they don't compete against someone who's done all the normal things when they went off to do, let's say, a period of deeper education in a technical area that's needed. So some leeway for the service secretary, more waiver authority perhaps, I think would be very helpful.
The other thing we talked about is we need to stay away. I think there's generally a consensus that there shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. And we also talked about taking into consideration how we seek input from the different service lines about maybe areas that we should look. For example, I think that there's a universal or kind of a horizontal focus on cyber, because that seems to be something that, although you may have different practices on a day-to-day basis, that's a category where we're really behind and we need to work, and it seems to be one area that we could possibly focus on as a part of anything that we may move forward with in the markup. But then there are the position that they may be unique to the line of service. Now, we talked about acquisition. You could also argue, on the one hand, it's horizontal. There may be unique needs based on the line of service. But you all said something that I think is interesting. On the one hand, Dr. Chu, I think you said something about pilots, and you guys said don't do pilots. I think what you're talking about is start small and work on things that have a greater potential for being operationalized versus a test and a good idea that goes away, maybe doesn't get authorized. That wouldn't be particularly appealing for somebody that's building a portfolio of experience in their career. Is that an appropriate way to interpret what you said?
If I can speak on that, sir, yes. Sometimes pilots get a bad name if they don't work out. So as an example, there's a problem with retention of female officers and enlisted, so there have been efforts to do sabbaticals. But I see those sabbaticals, and they don't look flexible to me. I talked to a young woman, enlisted, got into Stanford Business School. She thought about leaving as a sabbatical program, but there wasn't control for her, that when she got done with her MBA, she could choose whether to come back in or not. She could choose her career field. It was all, oh no, when you're done, if you're under this sabbatical program, we'll tell you where to go. To me, that's very disrespectful. And that's not flexibility. But the military can then interpret that and say, you know, we tried that flexible lateral entry idea, or lateral reentry in this case, doesn't work, because these women aren't taking up the program, because it's not really flexibility. So that's my sense of caution. Now, the type of a pilot project that could work is to say, take a career field and don't force that career field to use the pyramid, right? Allow long-term specialization, say, within cyber or intelligence, and maybe not in all the other competitive categories. I think that would be a brilliant, wise type of pilot project. But I would just caution against some of these.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. We're covering multiple hearings this afternoon, so for dashing in and out. But, you know, we're here to talk about how our military officers are recruited, retained, promoted, assigned. Our officer corps is the best in the world. We must have been doing something right. But I think about how things are changing over time, and I think about two ways they're changing. That DOTMA is this one-size-fits-all system. Everyone's been talking about that part. And today, a lot of young officers require a different kind of talent management. At the same time, the demands of modern warfare are driving changes in the types of officers that we need in order to lead in the future. We demand a force that is highly adaptive, that's technically skilled, in advanced technologies. You know, these are not skill sets that Congress had in mind when DOTMA was originally put together. So I worry that the Pentagon is just not set up either to be able to help guide careers or to be able to attract people, the people we need in a changing world. So here's the question I want to ask. I want to ask the one wish question. If you could make just one, because this is what forces you to have to make hard choices, one change to DOTMA in order to try to solve this part of the problem, the officer management of career and attracting the right people in, you could make one change. What change would you make? And we can start any place you want to start. Dr. Chu, you want to start?
Actually, the one change I would make is not DOTMA specific.
Fair enough.
But I would contrast how
This
the
is your
department
wish.
manages skills for the enlisted force versus skills for the officers.
Say more about
In
that.
the enlisted force, the department has, thanks to the Congress, a set of special compensation authorities, bonuses as they're called. It has wide latitude within constraints Congress established how those are paid. And it adjusts them. It really is a market, and it looks at results on retention, on both recruiting and retention. So I would consider giving the department somewhat broader authority for special compensation for officer communities, to allow it to deal, for example, with cyber. So if you're going to compete with Google, do you have to pay as we are paying for pilots, let's say? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I'm not trying to prejudge the answer to that question. But I think part of the answer, and that's the emphasis I would give, lies in other parts of the system, not just in DOTMA per se. It's also a matter of how you administer the new retirement system. It's an issue of how you administer other elements of compensation. So my one wish would be broad bonus authority for the officer corps. The department can apply in communities where it needs help, as
Very
opposed to
interesting.
specialized.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Levine?
So I get to choose a different one. So
Yes.
what I would suggest is, Dr. Kane mentioned the idea of sabbaticals. There's several different ideas around that idea. There's the Career Intermission Program, which is currently a pilot basis. There's sabbaticals. There's also the idea of opting out of a promotion cycle. These are all ways that you can build in additional flexibility into officer careers, so that this idea that you just have to keep punching tickets and there's only one path, you can get more flexibility into that, and officers can build greater depth of experience, greater breadth of experience. They can even, under some of these programs, take time out to start a family, but create greater flexibility within the existing system without disrupting the overall system and disrupting the military's ability to plan. And one thing I'd emphasize about that is I know we all think that the military is resistant to change, but I had the honor of serving with two of the officers who will be on the next panel and the immediate predecessors of the other two. They all supported this idea that we should build in this greater flexibility. The sabbatical program, the career intermission program, because they've been pilots, young officers have been unwilling to trust them and to believe that promotion boards will give them full credit and will understand why they chose the career paths. But I believe that if we make them permanent, and if we make this an established part of the way the career pattern works, and with the help of our military leadership, we can really build some more flexibility.
Well, and I just want to make sure I'm drawing the right point here. It's not that we make it permanent. It's that we open up the possibility that you can do it and you can make it permanent if you choose to make it permanent.
Congress would have to open up would create a permanent authority, but the service member
Permanent
would have
authority.
To make the
But you make the
determination.
decision
That's right.
whether or not it's permanent, and obviously what the parameters
Yes.
are for that. Okay. All right, good. Dr. Kane?
This is one of those juicy questions, and the genie says you get one wish, and you
Yeah,
say,
exactly.
3 wishes.
I know. But the other two guys already slurped up the first two, so you're
those
stuck
are,
where you are.
I would, this is broad, but I would end the tyranny of the personnel commands. And I'll tell you a little story because I think this is what galvanized me to start. I left the military, became an economist. I didn't think much about these issues. I was not as expert. A friend of mine was in the Air Force, 9/11 had happened, and he was doing a mission. He was doing targeting mission and got a call from Air Force Personnel Center that said, hey, congratulations, Major, you get to go back and get your master's degree. He's like, I'm helping find the enemy and putting bombs on the enemy and keeping America safe. I don't want to go. But there's so little control and there's so little respect for these men and women who volunteer to control their own careers. Oh, the needs of the Air Force have to come first. And it's such a nice sounding slogan, but what if that actually is short-term oriented and not long-term oriented? Because they ended up losing this officer. He didn't get 20 years of retirement, but he could go and work for a different government agency and do the exact same mission. But he had to give up his 20-year retirement. He had to go home and explain to his wife and kids, we're not going to have health care forever because I want to serve my country, and the Air Force won't let me do that. Because he'd already got 2 master's degrees on the taxpayer's dime, and he didn't want to go get a third. And they needed a warm body, and they said, no, you're the guy. And he said, I'm not going to go. And they said, well, we will forcibly retire you. That's the kind of nonsense that happens when people can't control their own careers. And I think part of that is saying, we'll manage it for you. There's incredible responsibility placed on the shoulders of the personnel commands, and they do the best they can. But I've had so many meetings and calls. At HRC, I visited NPC at Millington. They're just as frustrated, but they're given their mission and they do the best they can. So I would relieve them of that burden and say, one thing to change in DOPMA is you do not have to retire after you've failed to promote 2 times. You just don't. And so people wouldn't have that pressure of playing the game, checking the boxes, and the personnel commands wouldn't say, gee, if you don't go to this school or you don't get this master's degree or you don't take this joint assignment, you're not going to get promoted. It's just not there anymore. And that's what you can fix with a sentence. The Senate can fix.
And can I just ask, I know we're over, but I just want to ask on this, just probe just a little bit. You're confident that if we made that change, we won't end up with an officer corps that sort of bulges out and is sluggish? I mean, I always like to remember, somebody had something in mind when they wrote that.
Right.
They thought there was a problem they needed to fix. And it doesn't mean they got it right, but it means you've at least got to think about what happens if you roll it the other direction.
President Eisenhower, this goes back to the Civil War. The class of 1868 out of the Naval Academy, none of those graduates were able to get past lieutenant for 21 years because they didn't have an upper-out system. So they instituted it, but now it's crept down the ranks. It's not just for the generals. It sort of influences everyone. And it's not upper-out. It's sort of upper-up. You just sort of play by the rules. You get promoted, sort of lockstep. I would force excellence throughout. Every 2 years, you're recompeting for a position you're in. And if your boss decides to hire someone else, she has the right to do that. You need to go look for another role within the military. If you can't find anyone to hire you, thank you for your service.
So you think that's a way that we could prevent that from happening?
Constantly
so there'd be another way to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Very valuable. I find it enormously helpful to hear
If I may,
very specific suggestions. Dr. Chu, if this is okay.
We're treating upper out as if it is either a good or bad idea for all promotions. And there is differentiation here that might well be considered, and that is up through about 04. You may well want an upper-out system because that's really a I would argue, perform-to-stay criterion, and it helps avoid the kind of gumming up of the system that Dr. Kane described. It may be beyond that, that you want to be somewhat more relaxed about how many chances people have to 05, to 06, and so on, especially to 07. And I particularly would highlight what I think is an unfortunate wrinkle in the law, which is the bar to commissioned service beyond 30 years of service. Now, I don't think you necessarily want every 06 to stay for 35, 40 years of service, but there is a cadre in every service in my Georgia military of senior 06s who are not going to make general officer or flag, but who are the senior experts in their area. You speak about the lawyers, for example, and deep knowledge of the system. And I think you want to have a way to perhaps retain some more of those people who may be at the peak of their professional abilities when they hit 30 years of commissioned service. And our system says there is a way to deal with retiree recall. I recognize there are end runs around the constraints, but to more systematically think about keeping the most experienced, deeply technical 06s for longer than 30 years of commissioned service.
Right, but if I can, you describe that as a more relaxed requirement, and I realize it's relaxing the upper-out part of it, but if I understood Dr. Kane correctly, it's not so much a more relaxed, it actually just changes what the sorting device is. So it's no longer up or out, but you say we will substitute other, like recompete for the same job every 24 months. Is that right? And do you agree with that, Dr. Chu? Is that right?
Senator, if I could on that point, I think that as you look at the military personnel system, you have to keep the culture in mind too. And one of the central aspects of the military culture is an inability to say no. So I would be very concerned about abandoning the upper-out system in that if you say all the really best people we're going to keep, there's an inability to tell anybody that they're not one of the best.
All the children are above average.
And so as painful as it is to have arbitrary rules, sometimes those arbitrary rules really serve an important function. So the way I would try to meet Dr. Chu and Dr. Kane's objective there is by allowing the occasional exception or the career field where you're going to build in some exceptions because we need to retain talent, but not by abandoning the rule, which I think is a structure which is need to force decisions which otherwise people would be very reluctant to make.
And I think that does bring us back to the culture point, because as you all know, under DOTMA, the Service Secretary has authority for selection, retention, and grade. Rarely does the service use this authority. It also has authority on the other side of that coin to select out. Again, and the boards have authority to say that this officer perhaps should be reviewed for dismissal from the service. Not quite such strong language, I acknowledge. But again, rarely used, except when we have a downsizing problem and we have to have a reduction in force of some kind. So I think trying to encourage to have a conversation with the service about could we use these tools more aggressively to achieve some of these results would be very productive.
Good.
Senator Warren, you asked that you were going right after the questions I was going to ask. When we talked last week, most of the top-tier management consulting firms dealt with the upper-out issue back in the mid-'90s when you had 2 shots at making partner. If you didn't, you left. And we were losing some really deep talent that were a very important part of our go-to-market strategy. But we did have a period where we started bulging and started creating a diamond pyramid. So we did have to go back through and figure out how to do the refresh and I think get closer to what Mr. Levine's saying to get to force the excellence for that versus sort of a kind of a holding area. There's got to be a constant attainment of knowledge and skills and a broader contribution. So I think that discussion was very helpful. One thing that I would like to ask you all to think about and possibly get back with us. We talked a bit last week. A part of what we may need to do is shed light on flexibilities and options that are already available in DOTMA that are not regularly used. They're used on an episodic basis because I would rather shed light on that, and in the next panel we'll talk a bit about it. But shed light on, let's fully get all the juice we can out of the current authorities that you have, and then figure out what additional flexibilities you need, and with that, accountability for dealing with the peaks and troughs and the challenges for bringing people in for special needs that may not be long-term, those sorts of things. I'd really be interested in your feedback on what's actually the possible within DOPMA that isn't really a part of the day-to-day operation and execution of the personnel practices. So I would appreciate that feedback if you could give us some thought and potentially accept that as a question for the record. The last thing I want to do, and it's mainly Dr. Kane to set the stage for the next panel to react to it, is something that you said last week and you referred to today, and that has to do with you get an assignment, you get a person, you don't really get to do that sort of background hiring check. And you also said something in particular that had to do with things that may not be in the file, but may be information you would gather if you just had that final discussion before somebody gets deployed. You were particularly talking about sexual assault. Would you just frame your position, and while I've got people's attention, so that after you do your opening statements, I would like for you to give me a response from the perspective of the people who will speak at the next panel.
So, yes, sir. The issue of sexual assault in the military bothers me. It's 10 times higher than it is in the civilian sector. I went to the Air Force Academy. I would be very proud if any one of my daughters, and we have 3, would want to go. But I realize I'm kind of sending her into the lion's den in a sense. As I learn more about this issue, I don't really have a position, and I'm not an expert and understand the UCMJ processes. But I do understand that we entrust captains of Navy ships with nuclear weapons and tremendous wartime responsibilities, but not the authority to hire, not the authority to just, and I understand the risk of creating an old boys club where commanders can just build their team. But why not at least have the personnel commands send them 3 nominees? And then they call the commanders and say, the previous commanders, and say, what do you think about this guy? Well, he hasn't committed a crime, but there have been some problems. There have been some off-color jokes. And you know what? I've heard you're also, who else are you talking to? Oh, I've heard about him. He's a, solid, blah, blah, blah. That human dimension to human resources has really been taken out. And so I worry that that's a big part of the problem. Even if you got all of the UCMJ and who's going to do the prosecuting perfectly right, you still have a filtering problem before they become criminals where they're just predators. And I think that only gets fixed when you fix DOPMA and you include commanders in the process. To your point, I'll do 2 here. There's some flexibility right now for the services to do that, to institute, give 3 names to each commander. There's great flexibility to do better performance evaluations, which are, if I can use mild language, a disaster in the Air Force, and they're a disaster in the Army, and they're incredible in the Marines. So the Marines seem to know how to do performance evaluations really well. I have 20 recommendations in the book, Total Volunteer Force. Maybe a third require legislative action. So the other 2/3, yeah, there are flexibilities that are not well used now. But I'd say those third are really critical. DOPMA and the requirement to be promoted after two bites at the apple, I think, is silly. And some of them are compensation, some rigidities in compensation that this new blended retirement system will help. But it's hard to get lateral entry when you've already got someone halfway through a 20-year retirement. Can they leave, come back, what happens? And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. We're going to transition to the next panel, but again, I appreciate the reference to the book. But those suggestions on things that we should look at, don't fix something that's not broken, but let's figure out ideas that we can discuss that really prompt more extensive use of the authorities and the flexibility that's out there. I think it would be helpful and instructive to us. Thank you all for being here. You've spent a fair amount of time on the Hill the last couple of weeks talking on this subject. We really appreciate your continued engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll now transition to the next panel. The second panel includes Lieutenant General Thomas Seamands, Deputy Army Chief of Staff, G1, Vice Admiral Robert Burke, Chief of Naval Personnel, Lieutenant General Gina Grosso, Grosso? Pronounced that wrong. Deputy Air Force Secretary for Chief of Staff for Manpower, Personnel, and Services, and Lieutenant General Michael Michael Rocco, Deputy Marine Commandant for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. Thank you all for being here. We'll start with General Seamands. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Tillis, Ranking Member Gillibrand, distinguished members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you on behalf of the United States Army to testify on DOTMA. I've submitted a statement for the record and would like to highlight a few of the points from it now. DOTMA has been in place since 1980, and it's worked well to standardize the management of the career of Army officers. We now believe it's time to consider changes needed to more effectively and efficiently recruit, assess, retain the talented officers needed to sustain our ready force and to better manage and employ individual talents and specialized emerging skills. Over the past 38 years since DOTMA became law, our service needs, technology, the population we bring in, develop, and eventually return to communities has all changed. In fact, in the past 10 years alone, the Army has grown, drawn down, and thanks to you, grown again. While current DOTMA authorities allow for the Army to determine the required mix of grades and the numbers within those grades to execute assigned roles and missions, we were challenged to sustain some low-density, highly technical specialties like cyber has already been discussed, or specific skill populations within the larger branches. The Army is about people. A review of and adjustment to DOTMA would enable more efficient and effective management of human capital, help ensure inevitable cycles of reduction and expansion work more smoothly for the services. Our analysis tells us that while DOTMA is a solid framework, it would benefit from a review and adjustments to offer opportunities for managing key and critical skills within officer grades to deal with today's rapidly changing world. We believe there are opportunities for change that would enhance our ability to better meet the current and future requirements for both the active and reserve forces. We welcome the opportunity to work with the committee. So just if I can go off script for a second, I want to thank you for setting up the previous panel. That was like a PhD level discussion, and I took away a lot of notes that would be very useful. And again, sir, I'd like to say again, we greatly appreciate the committee's continuing support of the Army needs as we've adapted the challenges for a prolonged conflict, and welcome the opportunity to come before you today to testify concerning this critical personnel issue. I thank all of you for your continued support of the all-volunteer Army. And Chairman, if I can ask for a clarification, you asked us when we finished our opening statements to make a comment. Was it on the hiring or on the SHARP that you wanted us to make a comment?
I'm sorry?
When you asked Dr. Kane the final question.
It was on the hiring.
On the hiring?
Yeah.
So the Army has put together a program called AIM, Interactive Assignment Module. And what that does, sir, is it creates a marketplace for the officers in the Army and the commanders and the units that are in the field. It's a web-based technology system. We piloted it about a year ago, and now every officer on the current assignment cycle will do it. Essentially what happens, Senator, is the officer goes in and puts information into the module that's not readily available on the officer's record. So, for example, if they got their master's in hydrology, it would be helpful to know when a hurricane came through what the officer's skill sets were. And the unit can go in and identify the officers who meet the criteria they're looking for, and then engage the officer directly, and perhaps find an assignment the officer wasn't thinking about before, but the skill sets match what the unit is looking for. So we are still in the piloting stage. We expect to go fully live across the complete Army within the next year of officer assignments. But it's a great opportunity to capture the skills that are nowhere in the database, give access to the units that would be gaining the officers, and start a dialogue. So, for example, if a unit is, say, tip-fitted to go to Africa for a year, they can go in and find out that there was an officer who perhaps parents from the State Department and lived in Africa and has unique skills or experience, reach out to that officer and then come to an agreement as to why that officer should come to that unit, what would happen to them when they came, to give the officer predictability and give the unit a known quantity in terms of talent.
Very good, thank you. Admiral Burke.
Chairman Tillis, Ranking Member Gillibrand, distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss the challenges we face and tools we need for effective officer personnel management. The trends are clear. We are in a war for talent. The propensity to serve is declining amidst an improving economy, and it's adversely impacting both recruiting and retention. Sailors leaving the Navy continue to express frustration with our industrial-age personnel systems and inflexible and complex personnel processes. Through our Sailor 2025 program, Navy has begun modernizing personnel management programs and training systems. In conjunction with that effort, we've undertaken transformation of internal business processes to improve service to sailors, increase our agility, improve our responsiveness, and reduce cost. And we've gotten a good start within existing authorities, but to achieve the point of service expected by our officers and the standard of agility and responsiveness needed by our fleet commanders, we need a more flexible set of officer management tools. Three fundamental areas in which additional flexibility is necessary would be, first, some options to supplement assessing officers only at the entry level. Second, to provide some alternative career paths for officers beyond just the current up-or-out model. And third, the ability to reward talent and merit. We think these can be accomplished through relatively minor modifications to the current officer personnel management framework while maintaining the core DOTMA attributes, which, again, we think have served us very well. So in developing the future officer corps, we envision a combination of the current up-and-out model, which still would very much be the main path for the bulk of our core warfighting officers, but we would suggest that it be complemented by an up-and-stay and up-and-bring-back construct, as well as the addition of an entry path for directly hiring experts. The majority of Navy unrestricted line officers would remain under the up-and-out model until they separate from the service or retire or transition to an alternative path. Again, we think we would need a lateral appointment authority to hire experts into high-tech officer specialties, like we've been talking about earlier today, the cyber fields, information technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, even some special fields of acquisition. Adding an up-and-stay option would allow limited numbers of officers with specialized skills to remain longer in a specific technical or non-command career track. And then finally, adding an up-and-bring-back construct would provide for rapid return of qualified and experienced officers to the active duty component. Additionally, we have ideas on a number of adjustments designed to reward performance, something that DOTMA lacks today, as well as some ideas to remove disincentives for serving line officers to specialize and or pursue alternate career paths, education, or even life-work balance. And again, recognizing that one size does not fit all, and some of these needs may even be temporal in nature, these authorities would need to be tailored for discretionary use to meet each of the service's needs. Sir, we appreciate your continuing recognition of the need for change to ensure we have the necessary tools for officer force management in what is now clearly an increasingly dynamic and challenging global security environment, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. General Grosso.
Chairman Tillis, Ranking Member Gillibrand, thank you for the opportunity to join the discussion today on DOTMA modernization. America's airmen remain always there, providing global vigilance, reach, and power to defend our nation. DOTMA has achieved its intended purpose and been essential to building today's Air Force. As we look to the future, infusing flexibility into the law will not only assist our efforts in retaining talented officers currently serving today, but will also ensure the Air Force is an employer of choice in our ongoing nationwide war for talent. Your Air Force is eager to modernize promotion processes and systems. In 2015, we transformed our enlisted evaluation and promotion process with much success. Building on this success, we are now turning our focus to officer evaluation and promotion processes. DOTMA flexibility, such as affording officers the option to opt out of promotion, increased authority regarding constructive credit, and improving permeability between the active and reserve components will greatly assist our efforts. We are excited to partner with you, and we greatly appreciate the committee's continuing support of the Air Force and the interest in discussing DOTMA modernization. We look forward to collaborating with the Department of Defense, our sister services, and Congress to provide flexibilities in DOTMA to keep it relevant in the 21st century. I look forward to your questions. And if I could just quickly share with you on how we hire commanders. Our Chief of Staff, General Goldfein, as soon as he became the chief, changed the way we hire commanders. Commanders hire commanders. So we have a board process that calls the list and gives, basically creates a list of people to choose for command. That goes out to every hiring authority. That hiring authority can look at everybody on that list and pick who they want. That information goes to the Personnel Center, and what you'll find is that then there's some conflicts. So all the Personnel Center does is say, hey, Commander A, you want this person, Commander B, you want this person, you talk about it, and they have to resolve it. If they can't resolve it at their level, it goes to the next level, which is usually a 2- or 3-star commander, and we have found that the commanders have worked out all of the deconfliction. So in the United States Air Force, commanders hire commanders.
Thank you. General Rocco.
Chairman Tillis and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss officer personnel management in DOTMA. Your Marines are the foundation of the Marine Corps. They are the Corps' most critical resource and always will be. Your Marines are recruited, trained, and retained, and educated to win the nation's battles. Everything we do in the Marine Corps must contribute to their readiness and lethality in combat. Overall, recruiting and retention remain strong. We are bringing in and keeping young men and women whose past service and future potential makes the Corps stronger. Your Marines are supported by a professional civilian workforce across the service, and they remain committed to the Marine Corps mission. We appreciate the support of Congress, especially this subcommittee, for the increase in strengths and flexibilities that allow us to effectively manage our force. With the additional funding, this end strength increase will allow us to expand our capabilities to include cyber to meet the warfighting requirements. We're working with the Department of Defense and other services on the DOTMA study outlined in the NDAA. We are open to new ideas that improve officer management and retention, such as providing linear list promotion flexibility. When we look at DOTMA reform, linear list promotion flexibility is the Marine Corps' #1 priority. Lateral entry and ability to opt out are other authorities that can prove beneficial. We must remain adaptable and consider new ways to recruit and retain the high-tech force that we need for the future. Chairman Tillis, I look forward to your answering your questions. And if I just may add for the Marine Corps on the command board, how we pick commanders. We have separate command boards, much like our promotion boards. We take a group of former commanders, sequester them, much like a promotion board, and then they review the records, and then they provide recommendations to the commandant.
Admiral Burke, you want to weigh in on that one? I was going to get you on the tail end.
Yes, sir. Sorry, I didn't answer it up front. It's not a trust issue for not allowing the commanders to pick their crews, but it's more of a time issue, minimizing their distractions. But we do recognize the need to allow them to pick their talent, and in an effort to also make sure that there's an adequate talent distribution across the fleet, that you don't have too much of a concentration in one area and a lack of talent on another ship or another squadron. But we have piloted an effort under our Sailor 2025 efforts that we call Detailing Marketplace, which is very much a version of LinkedIn for the Navy. And sailors get to put an enhancement to their service record that puts additional information why they think they're the prime pick for that job, and communicate directly with the commands. So it's information in addition to their educational and job and experience records, and then communicate directly with the commands to sort of negotiate and sell themselves. And it increased the transparency in the process for the sailors, which gives them a lot more confidence. Also allows a little bit of horse trading in terms of preferences, and allows the commanders to be much more involved in seeing the entire field instead of having an external agency do invisible talent matching for them without them being able to see the whole thing. So we're on our 6th pilot for that right now. We've done a mix of officer and enlisted community pilots, and we'll be fielding it when our new information technology rolls out here this summer. We're going to be doing it on sort of handheld-based devices in about the August timeframe.
Admiral Burke, I also wanted to thank you for the time you spent with me in the office. You talked about the up or out. What about the go and get 'em?
Yes, sir. In the cyber world, again, the Navy experience, which I would say is not unlike the other services. We have established a curriculum at the Naval Academy, established in 2013. It was accredited just last year, and the first graduates graduated in 2016. In class of 2019, we'll have about 30 cyber warfare qualified graduates directly commissioned into that community. But for the most part, it's our cryptologic warfare folks from that community who also cover down on the cyber warfare mission. The offensive part of it, our information professional community handles the defensive part, and then our technical subject matter experts are a new LDO, limited duty officer community, that we created. And we're tapping senior enlisted cryptologist talent to fulfill those roles. And we're kind of broadening that talent pool as well. The one area that was new mission area for us that we're having particular challenges is in the cryptologic warfare, or rather the cyber warfare engineer realm. These are the folks that write the software, do the coding for the offensive operations, very much in high demand, within other government organizations as well as in the civilian community. And right now we are directly commissioning those folks and growing them in a relatively limited, officer community pool. Right now it's, 01 to 03 type of community. We've got about 40 officers in the program. And you gave us some relaxed authority to do a direct commission option with the ability to give 3 years constructive credit, but it's, that's kind of 01 to 02 pay, which is still leaves you in the mid $40,000, initial salary hiring range, give or take. And what we're finding is those folks are in high demand elsewhere, and they're being hired in the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year salary range. I was
about to say $40,000 could be the signing bonus.
Right.
Similar experiences in the other service lines?
Yes, sir. We're running the pilot, and we appreciate the authority to bring in people with up to 3 years. We would like to see that expanded, just like with an AMED, to bring in more senior people. And related to that may be a relaxation of the requirement to have 20 years active commissioned service by the age of 62, because we think there may be some people in industry or academia who would come in if they came in as a major lieutenant colonel, and they may be a little bit older and be able to bring that that experience and education to us. But I would echo the Admiral's comments.
General Grosso.
Chairman, I would just echo that. The cyber career field for the Air Force is an example of what Dr. Chu described as a cylinder. And so that's where that constructive credit really helps, because you could bring a talented person in at that field grade level rather than take 10 years to grow them. And so I would just echo constructive credit would be tremendously helpful for us.
And in the Marine Corps, we're still developing. We have Marines right now, both enlisted and officers, doing cyber missions, both on the offense and defense. And we have, granted, tyranny of small numbers, but we're bringing in Marines from other fields, be it the intel field, the information operations field, and the cryptologists. We're bringing in Marines who have a propensity for that skill, bringing them in directly into Marfor Cyber, sending them off, getting their qualifications, and then putting them to work in the cyber field.
General Grosso, I wanted to ask you a question. I know it was a topic that was discussed before the full committee. First, I know that you do have some widespread shortages among mid-grade officer ranks, and there was a decision to move forward with offering a 100% promotion opportunity. I believe at the time in the hearings, if my memory serves me correctly, that wasn't a permanent strategy, but was in place to deal with some of the challenges that you have. Over what period of time do you think that you will continue to maintain that policy? And if you move beyond that, then how have you fixed the problem, or was this just an episodic strategy?
Well, as we find we've got continuing growing end strength, we have shortages in the field grade, every non-rated field grade skill set. So that's why we went to a fully qualified promotion. That board is complete, but it is making its way through the process, and the secretary has not seen it yet. So once the secretary approves that, we will definitely come over and share the results with you. And so I think it's too early to give you a good answer on what the future is. Because I think we're going to see how did that board do, was the secretary comfortable with the results? That decision was made just as she was coming on. But I do think the constructive credit helps because our shortages are at that field grade level. So how we get talented field grade level in, whether we're leveraging the reserve component, we do want to try to keep, it sort of gets to what Dr. Kane was talking. Can you keep the talent that you have if it's performing well? Can you bring talent in at that mid-level as it takes us time to grow the force? But it definitely would not be a long-term thing because eventually we are assessing enough to grow into that.
Thank you. One of the things that I asked the prior panelists and a broader group that we met with last week was on the areas of how much of this could be fixed through more effective use of flexibilities you have today. So if we came back with a long list of tools that you already have in the toolbox that you're not using, are there any ones that you've looked at and think that they're not necessary? I mean, is there just this muscle memory and you haven't gone back to really fully explore what authorities you already have, or there have been thoughtful reasons why certain authorities you don't think are particularly helpful that others may think you should use? Just go down the line. We'll start with General Rocco.
We currently feel we have flexibility within the current DAMA system to do much of what we did. As I discussed in my opening comments, our number one priority is the merit-based lineal list adjustment. So we can reward those high-performing officers, those men and women that perform well ahead of their peers. So we feel if we have that adjustment, that will go a long way in solving some of the other issues we have. And again, when we talk about DATMA and we talk about not having enough or having too many at the certain levels, we are not, at least in the Marine Corps, we are not at our DATMA ceilings for the numbers of officers. And we promote based on requirements, not just based on somebody who wants to hang around. And I think our promotion rates kind of support that, where we retain for the most part the best and the brightest with an 85% promotion rate to captain, 70% to major, and so on and so forth. And if you do make lieutenant colonel, which is about a 60% promotion rate, you can stay to 28 years. And one of the things I noted from the previous panel I wrote down that we're going to pursue is the retire, retain. And I fully agree with some of the members of the last panel. At 30 years, requirement is colonels need to retire. We do have a retire, retain, but I'm not, we need to pursue that, I think, a little bit further.
Mr. Chairman, I think as we embark on this full-scale review of our promotions and evaluations, you will see us taking advantage of all of the flexibilities. I think you'll see increased competitive categories. You'll see some technical tracks as we do some modeling on that. So I think those flexibilities are very much appreciated, and I think we just culturally weren't at a point where we were comfortable using them, but I think you will definitely see that in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Admiral Burke.
We're confident that the things that we're asking for, we've exhausted the full range of the authorities that we have. We've done a lot of things under Sailor 2025. We have multiple year groups in a single promotion board. We've blinded our promotion boards to zones. We've had boards at the 06, 05 level where we've picked up to the maximum allowable numbers of below zone folks because we have blinded the boards to the zone of those folks, so they're picking purely on talent. We stood up an Office of Talent Optimization. We've relaxed our officer program age restrictions to the maximum extent possible unless there are physiological limitations. You helped us remove the last remaining restrictions on the Career Intermission Pilot Program, and we're probably the biggest user among the services. We've had tremendous success with aviation department heads who are now, females that had children, and those women are now, squadron commanders of aviation squadrons. Fleet Scholar Education Program that we put in place, tours with industry. We're experimenting with targeted reentry for reserve component folks to bring them in an expedited manner, but we're still limited by the scrolling process, which is one of the things that we hope to speed up as part of our active to reserve component permeability, the idea being, as Lieutenant General Grosso mentioned, the ability to move back and forth quickly. And then all these concepts of merit-based component to the pays that are just completely lacking. The current statutes allow for, if you interpret them liberally, which we would do the maximum extent possible, as we've been encouraged to do, you could put a merit-based component to some of the retention and enlistment bonus authorities, but not solely a merit-based pay. So that's the thing that we think we are lacking. But we've had tremendous support within OSD and Secretary of the Navy to use that full latitude and the things that we're asking for to build that sort of new pyramid and put incentives based on good performance and examine some of the ways to remove some of the disincentives. I think we're at the point where we need to change some statute. Thank you.
Thank you. General Seamands.
Mr. Chairman, we are starting our review to find out what authorities we need. Every time I come over, get a chance to talk to the PSMs, they enlighten me a little bit about existing authorities and help me get to where I need to be. The Secretary of the Army, who you recently confirmed, has been very clear that he's all about talent management. And so as we start peeling back all the challenges and issues we face, I suspect we'll explore and discover some cases where we have existing authorities we didn't realize we had. But I think for the most part, we understand what they are and employ them already.
Well, I thank you all. I just wanted to say I think the discussion that we had around the work in sharing information that goes beyond the personnel file was interesting, either the LinkedIn for the Navy, or did you refer to that as the AIM program?
Yes, sir, AIM 2, and eventually that will be incorporated in our IPSA, our Integrated Pay and Personnel System.
I do think going forward it would be interesting to see. I can see where that provides, I think, better visibility into the resources available from the perspective of optimizing who ultimately gets the assignment and having the command involved in that. And I would like to go back and talk about the other piece, which is really understanding the person. So you've got their skills and their past experience, and then the person, back to some of the testimony that Mr. Kane raised, particularly around folks that we may be able to find are moving through the system, where their next superior should be aware of certain behaviors they should look out for, particularly around sexual assault. So I'll be interested to have that discussion subsequent to the committee. Ranking Member Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on the sexual assault issue. Lieutenant General Grosso, prior to your current assignment, you served as the Director of Air Force Sexual Assault Prevention and Response in the Office of Vice Chief of Staff. In this discussion on officer personnel reforms, I think it's important that we note the recent changes in career specialization for military lawyers. Specifically, in the last two NDAAs, the committee has included language creating a pilot program to evaluate and improve specialization in criminal litigation, as well as to offer career progression in that field and improve specialization in criminal litigation, as well as to offer career progression in that field that is equivalent to other military lawyers. We did this because we recognize the benefit to services in having trained, experienced litigators who's dealing with the most serious criminal cases, including sexual assault. I know that the Navy has already developed a complex litigation track. Can the other services please talk about a little about how they've approached this pilot program? You can go first if you want. Yeah.
Senator Gillibrand, ma'am, we have implemented a litigation track. We bring in about 120 new JAGs a year, and all of them start with getting prosecution training. They pick the best of those, and they give them additional training, and then so they will increasingly specialize and stay on that litigation track. Now, obviously, we're just starting this, and we're learning from the Navy. And so we will watch along the way how it goes. We'd like to come back to you in a couple of years. One of the things that our TJAG is cognizant of is that this litigation is very taxing emotionally and mentally. And so how do we think about taking care of them? And one of the ideas that's come up is a career intermission program. So we are committed to creating a litigation track and helping these litigators be successful throughout their career. We will watch the promotions as well. That's one of the things, if should we make them their own competitive category, I think it's too soon to tell, but we will definitely be watching that. And then watching their well-being and see, do we need to think about something like an intermission program if they need some time away from the litigation and the stress of the litigation.
Ranking Member Gillibrand, from the Marine Corps, we have the bases and stations, we have litigators, or we have SJAs that do nothing but sexual assault cases. So we've set those folks apart. We've also hired subject matter experts to provide counsel for those lawyers that are dealing in nothing but sexual assault cases. As far as SJAs, when you look at it, we only have one special category, selection category in the Marine Corps. You're either restricted or a comptroller. And we're looking at expanding that to SJAs and some other MOSs. Thank you.
Senator Gillibrand, thanks for the question. Within the Army, we have started a pilot that creates a separate litigation track to hone those skills over time to allow the prosecutors to continue to have repetitive assignments in that area. We've also identified a skill identification or additional skill identifier for those prosecutors that would track them, not only that they occupy the position, but also their experience in terms of the number of cases they've tried and that kind of thing, so we can track the experience over time. We're also watching the promotion boards to make sure that those officers identified are promoted at or above the average for everybody else. Additionally, we've increased the training for those people along that career track to make sure they understand and can hone their skills to better support the victims.
I think you are familiar with our career track, ma'am. Again, we're specializing at the 04, 05, and 06 level. It's about 10% of our judge advocate general corps. So right now it's right around 90 judge advocate generals. And then they get in that career track and they stay on the prosecution path. We're going to be expanding it slightly over the course of the next year. And to about another 10 specializing in that area. But they do occasionally alternate out into judge roles as well as victim legal counsel to provide the respite and from the fatigue that General Grosso mentioned, but they're still very close to the courtroom environment continuously. In terms of the promotion protection, we do provide language in the convening order for the boards that directs the boards that of the special and critical role that the military justice litigation career track plays for good order, discipline, and accountability, which is very important for the Navy. And it directs the board to favorably consider the valuable contributions of superior performance in that career track. And as a result of that language in the convening order, we monitor and ensure that they have a higher than average for the Judge Advocate General Corps promotion rate, which they have enjoyed.
So would you recommend this to the other services?
It's the convening order language is an effective tool for the way the Navy boards work. I don't know if it has the same dynamic in the other services, but it is effective for Navy board dynamics. Yes, ma'am.
And how, if at all, do you think these programs can serve as a model for other specialty and highly trained career fields?
Senator Gillibrand, I would say that's what we're thinking about for the technical track. What does that look like? What's the path? What's the compensation? That was brought up by our distinguished panel members before. So anybody that needs to specialize in something, to your point earlier, we grow breadth but not depth. And that's something that we're looking at as we relook our performance management system. And we have, I think you've given us a lot of tools, and that's where we'll come back to you if we think we don't have enough.
Ranking Member Gillibrand, from the Marine Corps. We are certainly open to taking a look at all of that. One thing we found that even with pilots in aviation that we've looked at in detail, we've come to find out that Marines like being Marines first. And And even myself, on a personal note, having spent 7 years in my first squadron, I was ready to leave the squadron and do some other Marine things. And we found that throughout the fields, whether it's lawyers, whether it's pilots, or comptrollers for that matter. So we're looking at that. We're open to that. We realize the technical field, cyber in particular, is something that we need to take a hard look at, because the moment you leave that field, I think the spill-up time to become back to the expert that you were is probably a little bit more longer than some others. So we're sensitive to that fact, so we're looking at cyber in particular as a separate career track.
Can I ask one more question on this line? What other reforms are necessary to ensure we have trained, experienced military lawyers in the courtroom and that their career progression will not be harmed by their choice to specialize in this important field? Go ahead.
Ranking Member Gillibrand, we're looking at SJAs as a separate competitive category, so we ensure that we have the right people in the right places at the right promotion rate, and then promoted, if not at fleet average, but higher than the fleet average. Thank you.
Senator Gillibrand, we already have a separate competitive category just for lawyers, so I think as we embark on our litigation track, we just need to watch that yearly. I took a note certainly to, I think the MOI is get the language right in the MOI and then see how we are doing. Are we accomplishing what we want? Are they competing? Are they not competing? And then what are we going to do to fix it?
Yes, ma'am, we're using the separate competitive category already, and it's panned out well, and then the protective language for this particular career track has been successful. To your earlier question, I think this type of career track model is exactly to our vision of the up and stay kind of model. So I think it has a lot of applicability for other technical career fields and specialization, exactly what we're thinking.
Great.
Senator Gillibrand, within the Army, we compete our JAGs within a separate category, and we do have the MOI, as the other branches talked about, where we focus and highlight things for the board to do. With the skill identifier, we also have the ability to have a requirement that so many people in that specialty are picked, and so we continue to monitor that. And as the Admiral did, going back to the previous question, we have set up a separate category called information dominance for our cyber technical officers. And what we found is in the last 2 years, we've had 2 majors, 2 lieutenant colonels, and 2 colonels boards. And each cat time, the cyber officers have competed at or above the same level in terms of the results of the other categories. So they're performing. I think we're picking the right officers. And we've kind of designed the information dominance to be a petri dish, if you will, to test things and make sure that we get it right, things that we could possibly apply across the entire force.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand, and thank all of you. We're, we feel like there's a lot that works in DOTMA, and that we don't want to break something that's not broken. And I also think that your active engagement as we go through the process, we think that there are areas that we can improve, that we're going to work on language, and we want your active participation in that. One thing that maybe you should consider, we'll keep the record open for a week, and for any of the panelists, the prior panel or this panel, I'd like your feedback either through the formal channel or the committee or through communication with my staff and the committee staff, some of the things that a kind of a stop, start, continue assessment of current practices that you would like to make sure that if we're considering changes that we're vetting them with you and make sure that it's helpful. You do a great job. It's an honor to have a panel like this before us. We want your continued collaboration in the process, and we appreciate you being here today and your service to our great nation. We'll be again keeping the record open for a week, and thank you. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.